Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is time for the pre-match build-up show for Liverpool's Boxing Day match against Newcastle at Anfield at 3 o'clock on the 26th in what really should be a festive banker for Liverpool. Certainly when you consider all the matches we've got around this is a game that I think everyone will have looked at and thought, out of all of them, this one should be a nailed on 3 points. And to be honest, I think the most tension that is put into this game actually does come from those next two games we have to play. You know, the one at home against Arsenal, and then of course that massive game at the Etihad on the 3rd of January. I think because of those two games coming directly after this, there's kind of an extra pressure on Liverpool to make sure they get 3 points, almost to give themselves a bit of a cushion, because, you know, if we do win this game against Newcastle, then because of the lead we've built up on Manchester City now, that 4-point gap we've created, in theory, we can almost afford to slip up in at least one of those games against Arsenal and Manchester City, just because we will have given ourselves a bit of breathing space. So suddenly there is a little bit of extra pressure on there, because suddenly this looks like a must-win game. But at the end of the day, it's a Premier League title race and Liverpool are the pace setters. There's pressure on us in every single game. And if there's one thing this side has proved so far this season, it is that it absolutely lives for that pressure, and it is able to turn that pressure into positive performances, and of course the all-important thing, positive results and plenty of 3 points gathered throughout the campaign. So like I said, this game is looking like the banker. It's the one that you will have looked at and singled out as probably the easiest game out of the entire festive fixture run for Liverpool, possibly even the easiest game of the entire December month as well. So it is quite likely that we will see a little bit of rotation with the Liverpool lineup, obviously with only 3 days and those 2 rest days between this and the game against Arsenal and all the games we've played already so far this month. We are going to need to switch up the squad a little bit and give a few players a rest and bring in, of course, other players who haven't had that much football so far this season. But I also think because of the standard of the opposition relative to what we've been playing against over the last few games, I think this is actually quite a good opportunity for Liverpool to even experiment a little bit with players in different positions. And I'll come on to a little bit more of what I think about that when I talk about the actual lineup I'm expecting us to put out. But I would quite like to see Liverpool, you know, not throw the baby out with the bathwater or anything like that and go absolutely mad and play like, I don't know, 3 at the back or something like that, but maybe just tweak players' positions and where he's trying to get them to play, just to see whether maybe, you know, a player can play a different position we didn't think they could already play, and they could therefore be useful in that kind of role going forward into the second half of the season as well. Because if you can't try those kind of things against Newcastle at home, you're not really going to get any other better opportunities to do so later on in the season. And of course, with Manchester City, our closest rivals, although even they are becoming a bit of a speck in the rearview mirror now, with Liverpool building up that what feels like a massive 4-point lead. I think, you know, normally that would be considered quite tight, but because of how good that Manchester City side supposedly is, it feels like a huge achievement for Liverpool to be that far away from them already before we've even reached the halfway stage of the season. But City are, of course, away to Leicester, and I think there will be a lot of eyes on their performance as well, because not only is that quite a difficult game already, you know, Leicester getting a very good result against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Hopefully they can put in a similar performance, and obviously they are always a deadly threat on the break, like Palace were against City at the weekend as well, and we all know how that turned out. And of course, with Spurs now only 2 points behind City, it's really going to be interesting how they deal with those pressures now, because not only are they playing catch up with Liverpool, they've also got to be aware of the teams behind them, because if this City side slips down into 3rd place, probably not 4th, because Chelsea are, what's like 11 points behind us at the moment, so that puts them 7 behind City. But if they start to slip even further away from Liverpool, then the pressure will really start to mount on them, and we could pull even further away. So they're playing at the same time. Tottenham are playing at the same time as us as well. They've got Bournemouth at home. So it's going to be really interesting to see how all the teams deal with the pressure, and hopefully results will go our way yet again, although I feel like we've got all of our luck came in one weekend, essentially, with the City loss and the Chelsea loss as well. But fingers crossed for a little bit more favours from the teams lower down the table. So team news going into this game. One player that I think everyone is sweating over a little bit is Naby Keita. Obviously, he went off midway through the game against Wolverhampton Wanderers. It seems like he's going to be fine. So far, the updates we've received from Jurgen Klopp, he's essentially said that it was actually just like a cut on his foot and a cut on his ribs and stuff, something like that. So no muscle injuries or anything like that, which I think is what everyone was worried about, because when he went down and he was kind of feeling that area around his back, we were all kind of worried that it was going to be a repeat of the injury he picked up earlier on in the season during the international break, which kept him out for a few weeks and did kind of slow his development and his integration into this Liverpool side and the Premier League way of life. Thankfully, it's nothing like that, so he will probably be available for this game, although Jurgen Klopp hasn't had his press conference yet, so we haven't actually got a definitive answer. But I mean, if it's a cut, it doesn't sound like it was anywhere near as serious as the one Sadio Mane sustained that kept him out of the game. I think it was against Burnley, the one that he picked up against Everton, so he should probably be fine. Apart from that, Trent Alexander-Arnold is still continuing his recovery. Now, we don't necessarily know whether he's going to be available. That is certainly one where we will get a much better answer in Jurgen Klopp's press conference. But before the Wolves game, he did say that Trent wasn't going to be available for Wolves, but the situation was a lot more positive than originally thought, and this was a game where we could start to maybe think about playing him. So, of course, wait for the answer in the press conference, which will probably take place sometime tomorrow afternoon. I doubt they'll have it on Christmas Day, although you never know. That is the mad world of football in England and the English game, but we'll have a better answer then. But for now, I think he's certainly much more likely to play in this game than the one against Wolves, and much more likely to play in this game than was previously considered when he was forced off against Napoli. So as for how I think we're actually going to line up with the starting 11, it's going to be Alisson Becker in goal. Let's not even discuss it. The guy is an absolute phenomenon. Of course, if he does keep a clean sheet in this game, then absolute mad stat alert. The entirety of the Premier League, all 19 teams we will have played so far this season, will have managed to score as many goals against him as we did in the space of 180 minutes against Alisson Becker last season. That is a sign of A, just how ace Liverpool are, and certainly how ace we were going forward last season, and B, a sign of just how fantastic Alisson Becker and the rest of our defence has been so far this season. So fingers crossed for a festive clean sheet for Alisson Becker and the rest of the defence. Sorry, losing my voice. Centre-back pairing, I think, is probably going to have to be, again, Dejan Lovren and Virgil van Dijk, although I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Jurgen Klopp maybe tried something a little bit bold in this situation. Like I said, in terms of rotating players around and putting them in positions we haven't necessarily seen them in already this season, I think this would be probably, again, our best opportunity to at least have a go with Fabinho playing in that centre-back position, because with this injury crisis we have with the centre-backs at the moment, we are one injury away from that being a thing anyway, and Virgil van Dijk has played a lot of games, especially since the injuries to Joel Matip and Joe Gomez. He is virtually undroppable at this stage, as is technically Dejan Lovren. But I also think Van Dijk is normally fine because he's such a Rolls-Royce defender that he can cruise through games and he never really seems to get that tired. He doesn't necessarily seem to be that injury prone either, or at least fingers crossed and touch wood and whatever. That's the nearest piece of wood. He hasn't got any sort of bad injuries so far in his Liverpool career, but I do just think that game against Wolves, he probably had to work harder than he has in most games in his Liverpool career so far. Certainly in terms of he had to work for the full 90 minutes because Wolves were just restless in their attempts to get forward and get goals. And also with the players he was up against, you know, the counter-attacking Adama Traore, we actually got to see Virgil van Dijk break into a sprint and actually break a sweat, which is very rare for a player of his class. So I do think he could maybe do with a rest. Now, I'm not saying that he will play Fabinho at centre-back, but I think certainly if it's like 3-0 with half an hour to go or something like that, we could probably see Virgil van Dijk substituted off the pitch and Fabinho, or maybe even Wijnaldum, because, you know, the guy can play anywhere, it seems, put into that centre-back role just to give Virgil van Dijk a little bit of a rest ahead of course, those massive fixtures against Arsenal and Manchester City. The full-backs, I think we go with Nathaniel Klein at right back because Milner had a decent game against Wolves, but again, you rotate around a little bit. I think if Trent is in any way available, whether he's match fit or not, I think you certainly involve him in this game in some capacity. Now, even if that means him not starting or even coming on as a substitute, I think at least name him on the bench just to get him into that kind of that match day routine where you have to wake up early, you have to eat the meals for a match, you have to warm up out on the pitch with everyone before the game, you have to go through all the same kind of routines just to get his body back into the kind of situation where he isn't being brought in from the cold for that game against Arsenal. Now, like I said, if he's not that fit, don't bring him on by any means. But if he's capable of playing 20, 25 minutes, then again, ideally, Liverpool will be over the hill and far away from Newcastle by the time we reach that latter stage of the game. And of course, Nathaniel Clyne, a very fit footballer, has proved himself to be more than match fit since he came in. But he did, again, very much come in from the cold. So he's not really going to be able to play 90 minutes at full throttle, I don't think. So if you can give Clyne a bit of a rest, and if you can give Trent some minutes ahead of those games against Arsenal and City, then by all means bring him on. But I think Clyne should be the starting right back. And then the left back, this is where there is an interesting question, because again, this is one of those games where if you can't rest certain players in this match, you can't rest them ever. So I do think this is the ideal game to bring Alberto Moreno in and give Andrew Robertson a little bit of a rest. Now, whether that is a slight risk because of the fact we also got Nathaniel Clyne on the other side. So, you know, we saw what happened in the League Cup game against Chelsea, where, as we've seen both of them play fine so far this season, when you play them together as the two fullbacks, things don't really work, because whenever one of them has played, we've essentially just kind of made our system a bit lopsided. We've either told the right back to bomb forward a little bit more when Alberto Moreno's played, or even just defensively cover a little bit more. Or when Clyne's played, we've told Andrew Robertson to go forward a little bit more and almost tell Clyne to drop into a back three with the other two centre-backs. So it would be a risky move. But again, if you can't do it against Newcastle at home, when are you going to do it? And provided Liverpool's players a bit further up the pitch are capable of taking on a bit of extra responsibility and acknowledging that what's going on behind them might not quite be as fluid, and they're going to need to make compromises in the way they play to actually make sure that things don't come unstuck there, then I think we should be fine. This is, of course, not the first time we've played Alberto Moreno left back and Nathaniel Clyne right back. It might not even be the last, depending on how the season goes. So I think we do need to at least try it, give it a go, and this is a perfect game to try and do it. So the midfield, I think we go with the 4-2-3-1 or /4-4-2 because it is pretty flexible. The kind of formation and setup that's worked so well against the smaller teams at home. I think the midfield, Gini Wijnaldum definitely starts. He did, of course, not play against Wolves. He might have come on as a sub. I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure he did, because we did pack the midfield towards the end of that game. But he certainly didn't have enough of a run out to wear him out. So I think he's nailed on to start this game. And these kind of games do seem to suit him as well, especially when he plays in that midfield too alongside someone else. And I think alongside him, you do put Fabinho in. Now, it's an interesting question what you do here, because I think what Jurgen Klopp does in terms of partnering Wijnaldum with someone in midfield is very much informed by what he then wants to do against Arsenal. Now, I'd love to see Fabinho against Arsenal, and I think given how well he performed in that game against Man United, which is probably going to be a very similar kind of match and tactical setup to the way that we're going to approach the Arsenal match. So I think Fabinho probably does play in that game. But on the flip side, I also think he does very well alongside what's his name? I've completely forgotten it. Gini Wijnaldum in that midfield too. And if Newcastle do go for a bit of aerial threat, then he's capable of neutralising that as well. So I think he plays, and then you probably do bring him off for Henderson a bit later on or something like that, because I'll be honest, I don't know yet who is probably going to play in the midfield in the game against Arsenal. So I think you go with the Fabinho and Gini Wijnaldum midfield double pivot, and then ahead of them, I think you have Shaqiri at right mid, Firmino down the middle, Mane down the left, and then replacing Salah up top, I think you go with Daniel Sturridge. Salah, obviously, he needs a rest at some point. He was fantastic against Wolves, but he was also restless against Wolves. He really gave us a full 90-minute performance. Now, he's an incredibly fit footballer. He will have had 5 days to rest and everything like that, so I'm not saying that he'll be knackered and he can't possibly play this game. But again, you got to rest your players somewhere, and this is the ideal situation to do it. And we love to have a fully fit and firing Salah for the games against Arsenal and City. So I think we do probably bring him on at some point, even if it is 3-0 or if it's 1-1 or if Newcastle are, God forbid, beating us in some kind of horrendous apocalyptic dystopian scenario in which we're losing to Newcastle at Anfield to potentially lose our unbeaten record. Sounds mad. Stranger things have happened, especially with the lottery of the Boxing Day fixture. But I do think Salah will play some part, but certainly not from the start. And of course, Daniel Sturridge is a more than capable deputy, and also with him and Firmino on the pitch, they can swap roles. Sturridge can play in the number 10, as we've seen already so far this season, and they can play as a two up top together, with Shaqiri and Mane dropping deep a little bit further. So taking a look at Newcastle then. Now, obviously, we know a fair bit about how they're going to set up for this game. It is Rafa Benitez. It is away from home. It's Newcastle against Liverpool. You know, they're not going to play like Wolves. But I do think we're maybe walking into a trap if we think they are just going to sit back and take it from Liverpool. Now, in terms of how they've played this season, they have been sort of steady, but probably a bit unremarkable. You know, he's managed to keep them 5 clear of the relegation zone so far. They've trundled along and they've got results when they've needed them, but they've never kind of really blown teams away. And I think certainly in the big games, the kind of ones that Rafa Benitez will have relished as a kind of free hit and a chance to show just how good he is at setting up a team to be defensive and then hit teams on the counter, they haven't really got any good results. I mean, the closest they came to it was the game against Manchester United at Old Trafford, where they went 2-0 up and then, as we all know, painfully blew it and ended up losing 3-2, although at the end of the day, that did prolong the inevitable in terms of Jose Mourinho's reign, so we've got them to thank for that. But I do think, like I said, you're kidding yourself if you think they're just going to roll over and take it, because one thing that has characterised most of their games against the big teams is they have been pretty close. I mean, just remembering their game against Spurs, Chelsea, Arsenal, City and Man United, I'm pretty sure they lost all of those games, but they lost them all by 1 goal. And I think the Man United one was the only one that didn't end 2-1, with Newcastle, I think, getting an equaliser at some point. So they're not to be sniffed at, and they will set up well. But so far, just getting the results and getting over the line against the big teams has proven to be a little bit of a stumbling block for them so far this season. But as we all know, like I said, it's Rafa, it's Newcastle, they're away from home. We know what they're going to try and do, and we've always got to be wary that they are capable of getting a result by stifling us. And of course, going forward, they've got Salomon Rondon as well, who is enjoying a little bit of a purple patch of his own. He's got, I think, 4 goals in 7 games, which for a striker at that level, playing in a team that doesn't necessarily attack that much, that's a pretty good return. And those are the goals that have kept them free of the relegation zone, that have, like I said, just kind of kept them trundling along so far this season. But the key point for me is that they don't flow that easily going forward. And I think the most important thing is just to not give them a reason to believe that they can get something out of the game, because that's one thing Manchester United gave them. Manchester United invited Newcastle on. They let them have the ball. They defended so badly that Newcastle actually suddenly thought, you know what, we might get something out of this. And that's when they actually start to play more free-flowing football. That's when they start to commit enough men going forward to make stuff happen, and the players become a bit more creative and a bit more ambitious with what they're doing on the ball and the kind of sort of passes they're trying to play, and of course how often they actually try and find Salomon Rondon. So really, we've just got to keep a lid on the game at all times. The midfielder's got to kind of keep the tempo at the kind of tempo we want to be playing at, and most importantly, don't give Salomon Rondon a sniff. And that's why it's important that Van Dijk and Lovren are playing, because when teams have come to Anfield and look to sort of hit it long and hit the big target man and get him to hold the ball up, our defenders have just been so good at always winning those aerial duels, at always being up and over the centre forward, winning the header and not even allowing them to touch the ball, let alone trap it and bring their other attackers into play. So I think as long as we don't let them get their tails up, as long as we don't let them in behind and they don't start to think, well, actually something might be on here, like I said, with it being a bit of a lottery on Boxing Day, you know, the players are, I think no matter how much they try and say they are, they're going to be a little bit out of rhythm. Maybe if not mentally, still physically, they're going to be slightly altered for this game. And also with the fixtures being so congested, you never quite know what's going to happen, and there will of course be rotation as well. Now hopefully, with our squad being so much bigger than Newcastle's is, and our strength in depth being much more sort of equal to the first team than it is at Newcastle, we should have the better of them in this game, and either exhaustion sets in or they're simply not capable to put out the kind of 11 that would get a result against Liverpool. But like I said, we've got to be vigilant, we've got to be careful, because if we do, then we should have the game wrapped up by around the hour mark, and then we can start to make substitutions. Then we can take our foot off the gas a bit and head into second gear, and we can rest and ready ourselves up for those massive games against Arsenal, pardon me, and Manchester City. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, as always, hit the like button down there, hit the subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out loads of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Boxing Day with the post-match reaction after we have hopefully kept that 4-point lead by beating Newcastle at Anfield. Until then, bye for now.